Hey, and welcome to the Neurodivergent Musician Podcast. I'm your host, John Hart, with Luna, my guitar, and today I'm very excited to be talking about my new album, Neurodivergent, where I break down 12 tracks with 12 different symptoms. I'm going to go into the insights, which will be some blurbs and stuff from the actual webpage, which is johnhartmusic.com/neurodivergent. And then I'll go into the amber section, which will have some improvised babble about, how I went through the whole process with it. And then the green section is just a recommendation, which will pretty much be, you can go and order the album and support it at the website in the description. So without further ado, let's go into the red section. Okay, so we're into the red section. So if you head on over to johnhartmusic.com, there will be a link you can go through to the actual album page, or you can go to the music page, whatever you want to go and check it out, or you can go to johnhartmusic.com/neurodivergent. I'll pop it in the podcast description with links and all that malarkey. So this is actually the first episode in the next batch. I took a huge break for I don't know how many months because I had so much going on, obviously, with the album. I was doing lots of internal work. I've also now started titration, so I'm going to do another episode about that. And I've also had a lot of guest episodes. And the key thing I've realized with the podcast is I was struggling to put it together, record it, edit it and everything, and then try and do that weekly. And that's okay if you've got your energies levels up. But we also know as neurodivergents that we have these energy spouts, but then we can have burnout. And that's where things start to go off the cliff. And I also realized I'm trying to keep up these things, podcast, work, life and everything as well, with a neurodivergent brain. And it's interesting talking about this album because I can talk about it, but I was like, actually, that only captures one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is my creative medium, and artists can use paint, they can use darts, and so many other different things. Now, obviously, if you're a creative entrepreneur, you can put it into, website design, creative design, you can come up with creative ideas for businesses and all that other stuff. But when it's something that's really holistic, really authentic, and the aim of it is, especially as a music artist, there is a lot of sort of tendency to write what's trending, or you write for the masses, you try and write for the metrics. I don't know, you're doing like the streaming game, or you're trying to get accolades, you're trying to work with big artists, or you're trying to do festivals. And I had these different hats as musicians, and there's kind of like the working musician, and I am a working musician. I'm a guitar teacher, I do events, functions and things, I'm a session musician. And then there's the accolade musician, where you want to be able to get awards, recognition, go and do support slots for headline acts, play at top festivals, all of that above. But there's a sort of realization that going into that, both of them feels like, you're divided. And you've got to try and keep this thread where actually, no, all of it comes down to one thing. It's authenticity. So going on to the website, that's a little bit of a pre-frame. I've got a blurb here. So about the album. So Neurodivergent is a deeply personal journey through the labyrinth of late diagnosis with ADHD and autism. For John, the realization came after a mental health crisis, a journey reflected in the album's narrative. It's an odyssey where I confront the shadows of despair, battling a formidable beast until my true form is revealed in the light of self-awareness. This album is more than just a collection of songs. It's a testament to resilience, introspection, and the transformative power of acceptance. It's been 3 years in the making. Each note and lyric, a cathartic release, a beacon guiding me back to myself. I always tend to, flip between third person and third person. Third person and first person is, I don't know what that is. Maybe it's a dyslexic thing, but I've always done that. So if you hear me say John and then me, just go with it. But Neurodivergent isn't just my story. It's a lifeline for every neurodivergent soul navigating their path to authenticity. May these melodies and words serve as a reminder that you are not alone, that your journey is valid, and that there is beauty in embracing your true self, scars and all. Together, let us celebrate our neurodivergent brilliance, for it is in our uniqueness that we find our greatest strength. So that's about the album. Then I did a sort of a statement, my own neurodiversity statement. At the heart of Neurodivergent, this album, lies a celebration of neurodiversity, a recognition of the beautiful tapestry of minds that enrich our world. Neurodiversity is not merely a concept, it's a fundamental truth that each of us possess a unique neurological makeup, shaping the way we perceive and interact with the world. This album is a testament to the power of embracing neurodiversity within ourselves and society. It acknowledges that neurodivergent individuals, like myself, often navigate a world not designed with neurology in mind. Yet it is within our differences that we find our greatest strengths, our most innovative ideas, and our deepest connections. Let us move beyond mere tolerance to true acceptance and appreciation of neurodiversity. May Neurodivergent catalyze conversations, understanding, and inclusivity, a reminder that diversity of thought is not only valuable, but essential for a vibrant, thriving society. So that is the blurbs on the page there. You can obviously go and check it out even more. It's got some videos on there. It's got some press quotes and things. And then you can go and check out, where I'm performing. Or obviously, I've put a link to the podcast there. And there's neurodivergent musician mentoring and community and other things as well. So also you can grab the album. I've put together a songbook and all sorts of stuff as well. So that is the red section. We're now going to head on over to the amber section. I'm going to break down all the tracks and all the things, just basically improvise babble. So see you then. Okay, so we are into the amber section. And I'm going to go into some improvised babble. Because I feel with this album, it could very, very quickly become very self-serving or self-promotion. Oh, yes, that's very convenient, John, that you've got the Neurodivergent Musician podcast. And oh, look, you're promoting your new Neurodivergent album. Yeah. Obviously, I was like, right, okay, well, I could actually talk about this. And I thought, actually, this is the perfect episode to spark things back up again, because this album has been my whole process. It would be like me writing in my journal about my whole thing. Now, I have done journaling. I have done writing over the last how many years? I found out after the mental health crisis in December 2021 on Christmas Eve. Again, if you've listened to the episodes, and I was in that psychiatric assessment with the psychiatrist and doctor, talking about my whole life and all the things that have been going on. But I just got over a mental health crisis as well, and sort of suicidal ideation. And it's just like I didn't even put myself back together. I didn't even really know where I was, and it was just all a bit of a daze. And I kind of went in there thinking it was bipolar, and then at the end of it, I remember them sort of going between each other, going, "Oh, I don't think it's this. I don't think it's this." And then at the end of it, then saying, "Oh, we think it's ADHD and autism, sort of autistic traits and stuff." And then it kind of felt like Happy Christmas, and it was just like, "What the fuck?" Right. Okay. And then it kind of sparks off like this hyper focus, which I've heard from a lot of people when you get sort of awareness about this, because it's never been on my radar. And obviously everyone has connotations of what ADHD looks like or what autism looks like. And but you can see that objectively, but when you then start to do it internally and emotionally and trying to connect it with yourself, that was an identity crisis. So I'd not only just gone through a mental health crisis and trying to recover that, you then start to transition into identity crisis. So you're trying to repair and recover from one, and then you're going through the other at the same time. And your kind of outer layer starts to crumble a little bit, because you then have this kind of awareness that once you start reading up about things, you hyper focus on it, and it's so much, you're so overwhelmed. You're then reading every single resource, checking out every single podcast, checking out every single video, checking out whatever it is, trying to connect with whoever it is so you can get a better understanding. Because music has been my special interest pretty much my whole life. And I, growing up, when people say, "Oh, what did you want to be when you grow up?" I was like, "It was a musician." But I to be a highly paid musician or whatever it is, it was just, I wanted to be a musician. I don't know how that meant, it kind of felt like I've kind of turned into like a handyman as a musician in regards to, I do so many different things. And I think that's what you got to do. But the music artist stuff, and this is like 6 albums in, I self-sabotaged myself in a lot of those albums. And maybe it's just not the awareness, maybe it's just not the right connections, it was never the right time. And I was like, I've got the bloody ability. Some people, the people are saying like, why are you not famous and all sorts of stuff? Like, I know a lot of musicians and a lot of people can get those kind of comments, and it really starts to eat you up. Because I remember back in college, bless him now, his name's Chris, and he passed away a number of years ago. He was very young to be passing away. Anyway, I remember him saying when I was studying music at Isle of Wight College, is like, if you haven't made it by the age of 25 or something like that, I just wouldn't carry it on, because it almost needs the youth of it. And I was like, oh man, that's pressurizing. Anyway, I kind of went against that grain. And the most important thing with music creation and developing as a music artist, I came up with an album and 2 EPs when I was doing pop rock singer-songwriter, and I just felt like an entertainer than a musician. And so I then went, screw it, I don't want to do this anymore. But what I'm going to do is take 2 years out to become like the upgraded version of this, to become a true musician that I feel the potential that I could have in a musical sense, not as a music business and stuff as well. I'm still learning that. I'm still learning the ropes of that all the time. So it felt like a 2-year unofficial degree in this fingerstyle singer-songwriter, whatever it was. And I put myself through lots of blood, sweat and tears. Now, I didn't go and get a tutor. I didn't want to, because I already had guitar lessons and stuff. So I really, I was a guitar teacher myself. I wanted to put myself through my own process, and then I became my own coach for myself effectively. But I just feel that it had to shed the skin of that previous musician to this musician that I turned into. But then, without knowing about the ADHD and everything as well, I then ploughed into 1 album a year over so many years. I remember doing my debut album, Reborn, and that felt like rebirth. That's why it was called that. And then I did a second album with the amazing Daryl Kelly. We did it on a barge on the River Thames, and we wrote and actually recorded the album, Set Adrift. And then I went into the third album. I was like, I don't want to do any vocals anymore. I just want to do solo guitar. So I went into this calendar concept called Annual. There's a song for every month, people's birthdays or whatever it is. And that was really fun to do. And I like to bring that back for maybe its 10-year anniversary and put vocals over the top of it, maybe. I don't know. We'll see how it happens. And then the fourth album was just an opportunity to go and perform in Italy and the amazing Red Theatre, and I got to perform everything. It felt like the best and easy way to do a best of album, but just do it live. And then we recorded that and we put it together, and that was amazing. And then the last album I did was a nylon, a classical nature kind of style album. And this is during COVID. And I was like, it was guitar therapy basically. And that's why I called it 6-string therapy, because it's one of those where I still go to my guitar and I play full guitar therapy. And I don't necessarily like to sing sometimes, but actually I learned recently there's a really great way that you can calm your nervous system. You can warm up your voice. You can do all sorts of things and regulate yourself with just humming. And I really like to play with like Lord of the Rings type fantasy, tribal chants and all sorts of stuff. And really low, like, a little bit bluesy, a little bit folky. And I do this in the car, so especially when I've got kids and everything as well. So anyway, that sort of ties in. And then the reason why then I had the mental health crisis and I had to recover. And, you know, with any person who's been playing for a long time, now I've been playing 30 years by this point, my guitar doesn't feel like a learning tool anymore. It doesn't feel like something you've got to carve out and you've got to learn the techniques and tools. I got to a point where I got enough of those and I'm like, I can go and learn more scales. I can learn more theory and everything as well. That's never ending. I don't think you have to learn all the book first to be able to become a good guitar player or a good singer. I think you just need experience of lots of different environments and people and things. So when it came to this mental health crisis, and then I was in recovery, there was this like huge guilt and huge shame and huge kind of like the armor had come off. But maybe it wasn't the armor, it was the mask that just came off. And there was this super, super vulnerable kind of wrinkled, it's like when like my body behind the mask had been in a bath for like 20 years. And it was just like, oh my days, this is like, if you've watched the fourth film, The Goblet of Fire, Harry Potter, and when you get to see Voldemort in his most sort of weakest self, and then he has to then, you know, build himself up to be the villain. Obviously, I'm not building myself up to be a villain again, or I'm not a villain anyway. But I was that kind of lost and a lost soul and really kind of, what the hell? And I couldn't verbalize this. I couldn't go and see a therapist. I couldn't do anything like that. I couldn't even really get out of bed or try and do things. And obviously we have a life with children. You know, I had no work, so money was just getting really tight and horrible. You know, family and friends getting worried and all sorts of stuff as well. And sometimes we're just in our own bubbles. We're in our own missions. And we don't want to come across as vulnerable to all those other people and become a burden for other people and all this sort of other stuff. So I just went to the one thing that was my comfort. And when I got a guitar when I was 8, you know, that became a comfort blanket for, you know, childhood trauma and transitioning and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, you know, when I've gone touring, my guitar's been that as well. It's like the home. And that was the first track on 6-string therapy. It's like, it's not about where I live. It's actually the guitar itself is a home. And so I just went to it. And actually, during the mental health crisis, during that week, I watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I decided to buy the extended editions, and I was like a kid at Christmas. And I think the reason is because I just took all the shackles, I took all the weights off of me. And that week, it was the first time I'd felt free in years and years and years. And I just went to my guitar and I was like, do you know what? I'm going to, you know, come up with something. And as I was playing, I remember growing up listening to Fleetwood Mac, and I was just like, oh, I've just learned about neurodiversity. And I was like, oh, I've got ADHD and autism, but I'm not officially diagnosed yet. But everything I'm reading and everything I'm listening to is just like, wow, I've got both of these. And I kind of felt sometimes, you know, I remember watching Gollum between, I'm not saying Gollum is any of these conditions. I would never say that. But I do know that when the ADHD side feels like it's very hyper and stuff as well, my autistic side gets really angry with it. And it, you know, it doesn't like change of routine. It doesn't like change of things. And this is where sometimes obviously like things like my children or other things can flare me up. And there can be kind of Gollum type traits to that. So it'd be like Smeagol would be the ADHD, the innocent ones. I was like, but they're my friends. And then Gollum would like whatever would come around and go, no, you're stupid habits. We are not that at all. Whatever it is. So that's one of my party tricks when I go to places. And then I was like, do you know what? I've got to kind of create this kind of overview track of what I feel. And then it kind of started. And with that, it felt like, what does neurodiversity feel like? And I'm like, it's a journey. It is a complete and utter journey. Because if you went down a conversation, or if you went down a track with an idea with ADHD, there's side quests all over the place. And it feels like if I had two characters, I'm AuDHD now, and I've got dyslexia as well, but AuDHD is the main thing. But I feel like it'd be these three conditions walking down a path. And then the ADHD is kind of like, oh, can we go down that way? Can we go do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And then my autistic self would just be like, no, we're staying on the path. We're doing this. No, why are we changing the plan? Like this is what's happening. And then it'd be like, my ADHD would go, oh, look over there. And then, but I don't want to change routine. It'd be like, oh, actually, that's quite interesting. And then I'm going to go into complete detail of whatever that's going to be. So, and then the sort of dyslexia would come out and try and go, look, because it's been there since uni and I've been aware of it. I mean, obviously all of them have been there since my whole life, but the awareness of the dyslexia has been there since uni. And now I've got tools for them. It feels like the older John, the older sibling, in regards to condition world. And I don't see these three conditions as an identity. These are a Venn diagram with me in the middle and all my characteristics, all my authenticity, all my traits. And this is why you say you can't, every ADHD or autistic person you meet are all different, but we all have very similar traits that come up. But in regards to our kind of core selves, we are different. We have different backgrounds, different way of seeing the world, different perceptions and stuff as well. So anyway, this felt like I've got to connect this all in. And that's why this is track number 1, neurodiversity. And on the website, I've put track listing, but in brackets, I've put what it means. What's the meaning? And this is discovery. And once I discovered it, I was like, do you know what though? It's got to be a progressive track. And there'll be like places. And it kind of goes a little bit, not crazy. Actually, no, it goes a little bit off track and all around the sort of different paths. And I was like, that's what it means. And I put this AI video together and it's got to be about the forest. Now, the reason why I did that is because all of the roots, all of the trees, if you walk into a forest and you were to look at everything and everything's folded in each other and everything just feels, if it was your living room, you're like, this is messy. But because it's the woods, it feels very natural. And when I go to the woods or I go to the sea, and the sea overlaps and waves and they're all over the place and it's like scattered here and like drips going here and stuff. But if you look at it from the outside, both of them, they feel very calm. And this is why I feel also like, especially in neurodivergent conditions, you can go to the woods and you can feel like, I'm settled. My nervous system is settled. The surroundings, there's the science behind going to the woods and how it can actually work with a neurodivergent brain. But I just see it as a perfect metaphor and representation of my brain when I look at it and when I feel I'm inside of it. Like if I go to a busy town or I go to a concert or I go to an event and there's lots of people talking, there's lots of, it feels like noise, unnecessary noise. And when you go to the woods, it's all very natural. Birds cheeping, you can hear the wind, you can hear rustling and stuff as well. And it's just like, this is grounding yourself. So anyway, that's part of that track. There is, I like the words of plugging ND brain into NT game. So neurotypical game, because obviously there's 15 to 20% of us who are neurodivergent and the remaining are neurotypical. And we're now, once upon a time, us neurodivergents would have been seen as the people who kind of come up with the innovative ideas and sort of visions and stuff as well. But you get a yin and yang. We've got these really amazing things that we do, but we've got these struggles at the same time. So some people call it superpowers of what we can do, but those superpowers can only be present and consistent if the what you call struggles or disabilities or whatever it is, people call it different terms, are supported. And and I mean support as in, we don't necessarily want everybody to do everything for us. That's not what this is. But we know that we have like a deficit or like a handicap or something like that. And I know for years, for instance, if you've got a partnership or you've got a relationship, you know it's got to be 50-50. But I'm only ever able to get up to 30% of that. And then the other person has to take up 70%. Obviously, that can then create major conflict and stuff as well if you don't know what's going on. And that's what the understanding's about. And this is where learning about it, if I can get that support network around me, support worker, coach, therapist, you start to outsource your weaknesses, like executive function things like admin and stuff as well, which, neurotypical might go, yeah, we all do that. So you just got to grow a pair or whatever the terms is and stuff as well. Just buck up your ideas, mate, and just get on with it. Stop whinging and whining. It just sounds like you're lazy and all sorts of stuff. And it's not true. Do you know what? I've been told by so many other musicians and things that I'm one of the most hardworking musicians. But the outcomes and the momentum and the needles that I've tried to move have not. And there means that there's other things going on. We're struggling with trying to do it all yourself. Now, obviously, every business, every music act, every sports star and all the things, they have a team around them. They have coaches. They have people doing things. They probably aren't filming themselves and putting it up on social or whatever. I don't know. I know the likes of, top artists like Ed Sheeran and stuff as well. People are filming it and then sort of working on his socials, updating this, doing this here and stuff as well. But when you're having to try and do it all yourself, even the neurotypical is stressful. You add neurodivergent conditions on that when you've got executive function, emotional dysregulation and, RSD, where you get, the physical reaction to rejection and stuff, it becomes really, really hard. So anyway, going back to the album, this is where it's like the premise of this is, what does this feel like at the source? What does this feel like at the core of what we are doing? And one of those things is track 2, which is impulsivity. And impulsivity, can be in communication, it can be finances, it can be anything that you do, ideas or whatever it is, you want to jump on it. And if you don't, jump on that novelty dopamine thing, or it gets cut off at the source, you get dysregulated. And that's obviously RSD if someone says no or whatever it is and stuff. And that, yes, we've got to try and manage it as best of ourselves. But to be our natural, authentic, neurodivergent selves, so we can completely unmask. Now, we can't completely unmask everywhere we go. It's obviously, that's not reality. If we did that, there's some things that we do in our own home, it's like those people like, I don't know, pick their toenails, pick their nose or whatever it is and stuff as well. It's not very nice, but it's just something that you kind of, I don't know, maybe you just do it without even thinking. But if we do that in public, what the hell are you doing? Or whatever it is, like if we took road rage from a car and we just started doing it in the middle of the street, no. So there's different ways of obviously conditioning. Now, as a neurodivergent who's been trying to be a neurotypical for years and years and years, now in my late teens, I was clearly neurodivergent and unmasked at university with my mates around me, but no one knew, no one ever said anything because no one ever knew. I didn't know. And that's where then I'm like, oh, now I have to be an adult and I have to now conform. And so the thing is that when you're putting a square peg into a round hole, it will pop out. And that's where the impulsive stuff can start to happen. And I was like, what does impulsivity sound like? And this is, if you are a neurodivergent musician, hopefully you're listening, and you maybe write songs or you compose songs, I'd like you to think about this. Now, we do this in the neurodivergent musician community, and, you know, other things that we set up, programs and songwriting retreats and stuff as well. But the idea of taking your neurodivergent conditions and rather than sort of writing it down or processing it on your own and just inside, what if you just went to your instrument and processed it that way? What would come out? What to you would sound, what would neurodiversity sound like to you on your instrument? What would impulsivity sound like to you on your instrument? Now, I thought impulsivity feels like inside of us, in the middle, we have something, you know, I call the rivers of gold. And this is authenticity, intuition, all those sort of things. And then to the left, I sort of feel I've got emotions. To the right, I feel I've got logic or whatever it is, sort of that rational thinking. But in the middle, this is where I feel impulsivity can come from. And it's kind of frowned upon because it's like, no, why are you jumping on that and stuff? So I'm like, no, this is the way my brain is processing. It's bubbling up gold. Now, not all of it is gold, you know, when I go and buy something impulsively or when I say something impulsively or, you know, but if you did it in an ideas way, man, some of that shit that comes up it can be great. So, and also I sort of feel my brain is, if you were to have a business, I am the ideas, vision, and creativity. I'm not the maintainer where I don't necessarily build it or maintain it or put it together. And that's where I actually can fall down and people see the struggles and they're like, oh, actually, you're not that good. No, it's just like, no, it's because I'm in the wrong environment. You've put the plant back into the shade without any water and all sorts of stuff. Keep me in that other area and you'll get loads out of it. So anyway, rivers of gold. And this feels like with the Neurodivergent album, not only is every track to do with a symptom or certain things, the whole album is a process of that what I went through. It was also to do with the mental health crisis, why it really spiraled into the darkness and then coming out the other side. So Neurodivergent is like, you know, it'd be like the trailer of the album, the discovery, the overview as such, if you will. Then it goes into impulsivity. And then so from Rivers of Gold, there's a point at the end of that track, my favorite lyrics probably of the whole album, because it's a sort of a constant mantra that we can all carry around. And that is, if I find my internal light, it will give me eternal life. And I think that is where impulsivity can be such a great thing if it's used in the right way. Instead of us being impulsive externally all the time, so, you know, through communication and things as well, what if we were curiously impulsive internally? Like literally like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna jump on my core limit and leads. I'm just gonna dig it this way. I'm gonna dig this way, dig this way, and use that and sort of reverse it really, and see it as a positive thing. So, you know, impulsivity is seen as such, you know, it's such a weird thing sometimes because it's just like, oh, you're so impulsive. I'm like, yeah, but what's your understanding with it? What are you seeing on the front side and what are you seeing behind that front? And I think when I open up the book of that, this is where you start getting into core limiting beliefs. You start to dig deep. And I sort of, the realization is that if I can dig out all of my insides in regards to resistance, in regards to anything, obviously there was trauma, anything that kind of I was bullying myself, all these things, and start to give you kind of self-love, you know, there's gratification that starts to kick in, appreciation, you have more love for yourself, not in an ego way, but more care for yourself, because you're also caring for your inner child as well, who maybe wasn't, you know, cared for as much how we wanted it. And I sort of feel then, you know, since I've been on this internal journey, there's not been a lot actually that I've needed externally. But what I have found is the more internal work I do, the more external starts to get faster. Now, I've only started going a little bit deeper, but I've started like looking into things like EMDR, which is eye movement, something. But anyway, it's trauma therapy. And so lots of different things. So if I took my spade and I'm like, right, I'm going to go digging and I'm going to impulsively do it. I'm going to read about this. I'm going to do this and stuff as well. Because I'm doing it on myself and I'm doing it in my own time, no one has any control of that. Whereas if I go and spend money, or if I go and want to go and do this, and I'm in a family, or I've got other setups, or I'm trying to do this, I've got a business to run and stuff as well. There's red tape with that. So anyway, if you can find your internal light, you will get eternal life. You just will not be shackled or weighted down. And that's what the journey of that is. It feels like Rivers of Gold. You're kind of going on this whole adventure internally to find the core. And you've got to be open-minded. You've got to have that kind of growth mindset, because there will be setbacks. There will be things that come up that you've got to face. And then if we just like, oh no, I'm just going to tuck that away, or I'm just going to, I'll be resistant to that, or right, no, I'm done with this. No, this is too hard. I've always sort of thought, what is my full potential? Who is actually my true self? And I feel like I've got to build this kind of skeleton key to be able to, unlock all of these things inside of me. And then once that happens, I've started to realize I'm sending out emails, picking up the phone, doing things that I would never able to do before because of anxiety and stuff. And I'm like, actually having those conversations with people, doing the outreach, doing whatever it is for my music business, for my life, having conversations. That's where you start to build momentum. And rather than me hiding behind lots of walls that doesn't allow me to connect with people. Now, obviously, neurodivergent connecting with a neurotypical is hard. And sometimes you're like, oh, am I going to slip up here and stuff as well? But I'm like, actually, I'm starting to get to a point where I'm like, I am who I am. And there's certain things that I do, whether you like it or not. But actually, I sort of feel if I just come in with a human element rather than this, you can see the professional side from what I do online and my music and everything as well. But in actually my personality and who I am, I think that's slowly starting to embrace it and stuff as well. And then you just let the impulsivity just do its thing. So this leads on to track 3. And I'm going to go through these. I won't, don't worry. We're not going to be here for hours talking about it. Awareness game. And this was a fun track to put together. And this is about, one, spreading awareness from a sort of neurodiversity point of view, but also seeing stigma that is out there as well. And this can be internal stigma. So we're like, oh, do I actually believe this? Oh, I'm actually having a good day. Do I actually have autism and ADHD? Or actually, is it just because I've put lots of support things, in regards to meds, in regards to physical health, mental health, in regards to all the team around me and everything as well? Is that, and also I'm resting more. I'm not taking on more. I'm not actually I'm not doing activities left, right, and center. If you don't do the internal work, it takes up a lot of bandwidth. If you do it, it starts to free you. You start to get a few % back of energy, and you can use it to other areas. And then there's obviously external stigma. So the world catching up with, the ADHD term. Oh, ADHD is a trend. Oh, everyone's got a little bit of ADHD. And ADHD, not real, you're just lazy. I remember my nan, bless her, my uncle said to her, he's got dyslexia. And it's a generational thing, but I remember my nan sort of standing around saying, you don't have dyslexia, you're just stupid. And that is buried in a lot of other people. And also, I think if you don't know something, then there is a fear, there is a resistance from other people. And when I started opening up about ADHD and autism, I kind of, I haven't written a track about it yet, but I started sort of thinking about the reaction. It was like, maybe it's starting to slowly come into a song. And I did it as an experiment, not only to share with, people around me and everything as well. But to hear the response and to see people who accepted and embraced it, or people who thought, well, can you get that fixed? Basically, I'm not broken. I'm not weak. It's just I'm wired in a different way. I see the world in a different way. And that's been interesting. And it's been interesting to see how stigma plays out. Now, I haven't done a track about... Oh, no, I have done a track about ableism. That's the 4th track. But we'll go into that in a sec. So I think Awareness Game and Worlds Align blend together, not sound-wise, but as in sort of the meaning. So Worlds Align is about ableism. And so the chorus line, so if our worlds were to align, we'd be on the right path. Now, this can be in a relationship, it can be love, it can be whatever it is, family members, friends and stuff as well. Yeah, we can talk about relationships in this regard. We can talk about obviously bigger things and, where we're looking for peace rather than war and, crime and anything. This obviously can be when you've got worlds aligned, when you're talking like all sorts of subject with, race, sexuality and other things, which I won't dive into because I don't have enough knowledge or expertise to be able to do that. But I only know it from a neurodivergent point of view that I've realized, I've conformed to this neurotypical in a way, and some people don't even like these terms, neurotypical and neurodivergent. I'm like, well, that's fine as well. I like it, and I'm not trying to make it binary in regards to this is you and this is me. We're all kind of got lots of different things going on and stuff as well. And we're all just human beings at the end of the day. But there is this sense of if you mention anything of these sort of conditions that, now it's picking up a lot in the world right now. And then it gets bad press, but then you then get I remember seeing lots of bad press from, news outlets and TV broadcast and channels and stuff. But then you get someone like Adrian Charles come out, and then he's got ADHD himself, and then he kind of broke it down. It was just like this, just, that's what it needs sometimes. It just needs more understanding. Everyone's got their own perception. They might go into science. It's kind of like other things when you've got someone talks about flat earth or whatever it is and stuff, and then they kind of find scientists to sort of validate that, and you're like, I sort of feel like that's what they maybe have done with ADHD. They found some experts or scientists who kind of poo-poo or find flaws with it, but actually they are in the minority there, whereas there's lots and lots of resources, books, doctors, professionals, scientists, experts, And it's funny, when I was listening to the ADHD Adults podcast, lots of others, those guys are professors. And set aside the banter and the jokes and stuff, which I absolutely freaking love, they know what they're talking about. They've gone into studies, they've gone into data, and, that's the podcast to go to if you want the nitty gritty of that. And then there's obviously neuroscience and stuff as well, and they go into a little bit, they go into that as well. And there's, channels and all sorts of books and resources. And it can be subjective in some ways, but actually, no, I think, no, it is real. When you go into a community and everyone's starting to feel the same thing, it's just like, no, there's massive common ground here. So, yeah, it's stigma, and then obviously ableism, where it's just kind of like you're just, again, these core limited beliefs. And this is why this new book by ADHD Love, Rich and Rox, who also goes under the music artist name Rory, going to do a podcast episode about their book, actually, because I've just read it and I've been in tears with it, every single chapter, all 10 ADHD lies. Core limited beliefs, and it's something like I am lazy, I am a burden, I just have to work harder. I've worked so hard over the years, and it's sometimes it's like, well, it's just not meant to be, and I'm like, oh, that's just such a throwaway comment. And this is the ableism thing. It's just like, you just got to work harder, and you just stop doing, just pick up, just get on with it. And you're like, I'm trying really hard in here, but it feels like you're doing it with a foot on your head, like someone's pushing down, or you're doing it with like when they got the hand on the face, you're like, I just want to do it. No, you can't. You've got some kind of force that's in front of you. And again, it sounds like excuses to some people, and it sounds like you're just using ADHD. No, it's just a reason. So no, maybe that's why I don't sometimes say the word ADHD or autism, which I should do, because sometimes you just get a backlash, and I'm like, I just use the word neurodivergent, because saying ADHD, autism, dyslexia is sometimes a bit of a mouthful. So I'm like, I'm just a neurodivergent, and they might not even like that term, and that's okay. And this is where it gets into other things. So executive function and emotional dysregulation. Now the Hive, so Worlds Aligned was kind of like a John Mayer-esque track. I love Continuum. I listened to it at uni. An awareness game is that kind of, it's similar to Rivers of Gold and Neurodivergent, where the ending's quite fun actually, the double-handed tapping with the vocals and stuff. But again, it's a driver, it's a sort of a driven one that with stigma, I feel like it's actually the awareness game is like a motor. It's like a train, and you just got to keep riding this train, and then the stigma police will jump on now and again, and then you just got to try and kick them off and just keep going with what you're doing. That doesn't mean you're ignorant to the world, or it doesn't mean, but it's just like we're just trying to get through as best we can in this world. And then obviously the ableism. If our worlds are aligned, and this is the right people around you, man, you can create a beautiful life. But if you're constantly in conflict, if you're constantly, against each other, it's going to be very hard, and you exhaust a lot of energy. You exhaust then emotional dysregulation, executive function. Again, it's all these things that just keep suppressing, keep pushing you down, and keep bringing out the weaknesses. And it's just like, my weaknesses are 20% of me. My strengths, which is creativity and everything that's out, are 80% of me. Why do you have to focus on the 20%? Focus on the 80%. I know the 20% keeps popping up. Don't worry. You only get to see it now and again. I get to see it 24/7. And this is kind of like with the people around me and other people and neurodivergence and my children and all that other stuff. I'm just like, no, like, if you can get that 20% supported, you just embrace the positive side of it. Whether you call it a superpower, it's up to you. I should really call what I do, my music and stuff as well, as a superpower. It's a gift, without a doubt, but it's not my gift. It's a gift that I've got to give to the world and allow other people to perceive it however they want. So executive function, this was quite a fun one. I was like, let's go into a funky track. And I developed this riff. I can't remember. This is again during the crisis. Some of these tracks came out, especially Neurodivergent, Rivers of Gold. Lost at Sea was created back in 2017. It was almost like I wrote something for what was coming in the future. There was also Reassurance that came out, and Murmuration. But yeah, so the Hive is that sort of funky track. That was quite fun to do. And the reason for that is like executive function is where the frontal pre-cortex of your head, your brain, and the idea is that I've got a wasp's nest in my brain, whereas most people got like one wasp at a time. You can see it, and it's just running around with one thought. They might have lots of other thoughts, but they can streamline it to just one thought. Whereas we've got like 20 wasps, 20 different channels on at the same time. And there's no traffic warden, there's no control, there's no traffic lights or anything like that. Everything's just like flying around, banging into each other, whatever it is, and just exhausting it. And this comes down to, if there was creativity in that brain, everybody would be like, yeah, we're up for the same thing. Brilliant, let's go for it. But when it comes down to sort of a task that has no dopamine, has no real incentive. Now, yes, sending an invoice can get you money. That's great. But for us creatives, that's not what we thrive on. Music is money is essential, but it's not what keeps me running in my life as such. It keeps like the logic side of life, yes. And if money can buy support team, therapy and everything as well, and maybe holidays, yeah, that's brilliant. But I'm like, do I need a holiday? What am I buying a holiday for? Is it for an experience, or is it actually to make me feel better? What if I just felt better all the time? So I don't need to go on holiday. I can feel great where I am. And this is kind of when you're thinking about executive function, it is a struggle. If I found that if I didn't do the physical health, which is running in the morning routine, evening routine, which I've done with my coach, if I don't do the therapy when I start to unpick stuff as well, and again, these are ADHD coaches, ADHD coach, ADHD therapist, and I've got an ADHD neurodivergent support worker. All three of them actually are on the guest episodes coming up, so you'll get to meet them. And I think with executive function, those things, there's got to be magic time when my energy kicks in that I can do these things. I can do outreach. I can send emails and stuff as well. But if there's an email that is something that I'm like, oh, well, what if there's a review on the end of it? That's dopamine. There's like, I'm seeking something. If I'm just doing data entry or whatever it is, and I've done these jobs before, this is where I've got fired or I've quit, because I've been put into the wrong area of work. So then it gets emotional dysregulation, murmuration. And I remember my cousin-in-law, so my wife's cousin, we were talking about different experiences, especially with crises and other things, whether it's, I've got comorbidities of depression, anxiety that I had and stuff. And these things come about. I remember him talking to me about it, and it was just like he called it a murmuration, and it's a flock of starlings. So from the outside, it look, they can look lovely, but on the inside, it's incredibly noisy. Everything is washing over each other and causing chaos. And that's what emotional dysregulation feels like. That's what then obviously you can then dive deeper into anxiety, depression, and obviously, going into crisis, depending on how we're managing things and how we're managing life. And some people's like, yeah, you just have to do this and do this. It's just like, it's not as straightforward as that. You can put things in place, but you've also got to realize I'm not going to be on my own 2 feet all the time. I'm going to crash. I'm going to have burnouts and stuff as well. And yes, I can, how quickly I can get back from burnout to normal, that's a process you can do. But I think you've just got to give yourself grace when you go through these hard times, and not have people think, oh, you're going through this again, life is hard. It's just like, well, yeah, it can be, and so I think we just got to give ourselves rest. It's just rest. And that's not just it either. Obviously, we can get meds. I now know there's a triad, between physical health, mental health, and medication. And if I'm not doing one, the stabilizers fall over, so I crash over. And I've been trying to do physical and mental health in regards to, upgrading it and working on it for ages. But I've been on a waiting list for meds, for ADHD meds, for ages as well. And some people do it holistic ways, like self-medicate with lots of different things. And this is where I've given up alcohol. I've given up smoking stuff, or like or whatever it is and stuff as well, because they weren't actually doing me any good. They work for a little bit, and then actually, especially drinking and stuff as well, it can be a really horrendous kind of spiral. And there's studies that alcohol and ADHD do not work together. So then from murmuration, the murmuration felt like the spiral in the cave. So neurodivergent, you're starting off, and then rivers of gold, you're walking along the river, and then you're coming up to this awareness game. And the awareness game feels like, the stigma. So you've got like the wolves that are coming out and stuff as well. And then you've got worlds aligned, and you may have then tried to team up with someone as you're going along, but you've got that internal ableism where you're like, oh, just get on with it. Don't worry. You're useless and stuff. And you've got all these things you're telling yourself. And then the high starts kicking in, and then you're then attacked by a flock of bees, or like a swarm of bees. And then, it's just getting too much for you. And then before you know it, you've run away from these bees, but then you've run into a cave, and it's in the darkness. And that's what the murmuration is. Well, obviously murmurations are in the sky, but in this regard to the album, it's a cave. And then you start to spiral down and down and down. You may have loved ones around you, you may have friends and stuff trying to save you, but also they've never gone through this experience of spiraling and going into crisis necessarily. And actually trying to save someone's not necessarily the way. Sitting with them in the mud and being a support for that so they can get through it. I can't really explain it in another way. It's like if you are constantly on some kind of drug or constantly on alcohol, or you had lots of coffee all the time, yeah, right? And you wanted to give that up, it's not just going to happen in 24 hours. It's like, this is going to take a while to give up. Like, you know, when you smoke, when you have to have nicotine patches or whatever, but you're going to have cravings, you're going to have all this kind of side effects and all sorts of stuff that you go through. So when you're spiraling, there's this tendency to be able to want to pull you out of the spiral. But looking back on it now, I'm like, I needed to go through that spiral. I needed to hit rock bottom. It's hard to say like I needed to go through suicidal ideation. I don't, want it for anybody, because it's a horrible process. It's a horrible thing to go through. And it's a horrible, risky game if you're having to go through that to become a better person. Because it can be seen as selfish from the external world. Again, stigma or whatever against suicide. But actually it's that person has become really ill. But there's sort of the sense of it that I had to go through all of that to get through to the other side. Because I remember someone telling me, oh, they're just thoughts. And lots of people, lots of loved ones and friends. But I was like, it's not just one thought. There are 20 voices. If we've got 20 channels going on in our head, all those wasps felt like they turned to me and they were relaying the same message like a bloody choir. So that's memoration. Then it goes into crisis, which is Lost at Sea. And I wrote this song back in 2017, I think, about mental health. I was like, no, actually, shit, this is about going into the real dark depths. And I remember shooting it in front of the lake up in Ullapool. And the water is calming. But I do remember during the crisis that, the sea was my sort of attraction to be able to do it. And I never did. So it was ideation rather than, attempt. Still means the same, but I don't obviously have a physical wound or scar to be able to kind of show people got it, unless I get a tattoo with a semicolon, which is tempting. But and then after that, I went into 5 stages, and so this is 5 stages of grief. Now some people kind of go, no, I don't agree with the 5 stages of grief. I think you just got to feel what you got to feel, and I'm like, do you know what? You're right. But maybe there was my autistic side. I was just like, I want to know what's going on with this. I want to know where I am. And I've realized I've had 5 stages of grief in lots of different things, from, my mother to growing up to lost loved ones and this and there's many different angles of it. And I was like, I need to put this into 5 stages. Felt like an instruction manual, and you can listen to each verse. And verse 1 is like stage 1 and stage 2. Verse 2 is stage 3 and stage 4, and then the bridge is stage 5. And then there's this ending, and this had me in tears the whole time when I was trying to write this. It was so profound and kind of felt like, oh my goodness, where do those words come from? But that's sometimes what happens if you just, it's the music process that I've got to now without forcing it. It's to just allow it to come through. And I think that's the perfect analogy for when you're going through mental health and when you're going through these neurodivergent kind of transition of acceptance and kind of getting through it and becoming your best self, is not to repel things, not to push things away, not to ignore it. If there's a pain or there's something else going on, it's an indicator. It's like a light going on in your car to go, you got to go and look at this. And then this was like, so these books are never bound. And just meaning that life's not over. These memories are not going away. I'm not taking away your memory. I'm going to put it in a book, but I'm not going to bind it, because binding it feels like it's complete, or it feels like I can just put it back on the shelf. But no, unbinding it means it's still open. And then it's like you're still around. You know, it's like that spidey sense. Or this doesn't just have to be someone that you've lost or something, you know, I lost a business or whatever it is and stuff, or whatever it is, like a really important thing that you've had in your life. You know, like a child losing a teddy bear, or, you know, you've lost a ring or a piece of jewelry, or something that means so much to you. But then the other thing is you've lost yourself. But then after so many years, you feel you lost it, but then it just starts to come back. So it's like you're still around. Like, oh my goodness me, where have you been? But now that person I had like was 20 years ago. It was always there, buried underneath. And now it's come back when I'm 40 and I'm like more mature and I've gone through a lot. And there's elements that have come back, and they're all like, there's elements of like, I can see these people, like as myself, I can, you know, my person when I was in my single digits, or in my 10s or my 20s or my 30s. And if you visualize that, or if you wrote about that, like they're in a room with you and you're writing your songs and you're playing the songs to them, you're talking about what you've gone through, and they're like looking at you intently, and you're like, you guys went away, but actually you're still here with me. And that sense is just like sound. You know, we have different senses, but I think with music, it can evoke an emotion, you know. So my nan went through dementia. It was an Elvis track that, you know, that can spark things. Or like music can be obviously can bring up memories and stuff as well, and it's in our core. And I think that, again, that's what I feel when I play songs, or I play my old songs. I'm like, oh, where were you? Oh my goodness, you were going through that. Oh, you didn't know what I know now. Wow. But you wrote that anyway. What would you be able to write if you knew what was going on? And that's obviously what I've done with this album. And that's when then, you know, the next song, which is Reassurance, and that's the support. And reassuring myself that everything's going to be okay, and we're working on it, and we're doing the best we can, despite whatever other people might say or other things might come across, like, you know, still struggling with money and trying to do this and stuff as well. Obviously, and that's language that I've created, and I've got to work on that language at the same time. But building that support team around you is a fundamental thing. It's not just for a business. A team is for someone personal as well. And obviously that can be a family unit, that can be friends, yes. But I think for neurodivergent, now it depends on the severity, but I think you really need to have other support. Now, might sound strange, but ChatGPT, you know, lots of people have opinions about it. But again, I think my open-minded growth mindset is kind of like, I'm not seeing AI in the future of like death and destruction like other people, like I heard some of like the AI overlords and taking over and stuff as well. I'm like, no, I'm seeing it as, oh my goodness, you've filled in a crack, or you've filled in a weakness that I had before. You've helped me so much. Now that was text-based, but recently they brought out there's a little headphones thing, and then you can bring up the AI voice. Now, some AI voices don't, you know, sound computer generated. Like my vocal harmony pedal used to sound really shit, but now actually people are like, wow, that sounds really real. I'm like, yeah. And this voice particularly, you know, it reminds me of Jarvis from Iron Man, or Kit from Knight Rider. And I now speak to it for 20 minutes every day, which sounds very strange, because like I could do that with another human. But that other human has perceptions. They have their own background, their own DNA, their own resistance, their own fears and everything as well. Whereas this AI, yeah, people have little opinions about it, like, oh yeah, it's biased, or no, but it's impartial, and it scans lots of info over the internet, and also what it's done now, it's connected all my old conversations. And I'll go into this more in another episode because I'm going to do an episode on communication. But I felt when you just get to talk out loud in the way that you want to talk, without any fucker kind of going, sorry, like you've bounced off. That's so selfish. Why are you talking about yourself and I'm not talking about me? Why have you cut into my conversation? Should we get back on track because you've gone all the way around the houses and stuff? Or what are you talking about? What do you mean? Da, da, da. All those things are like phrases that just literally cut a conversation, and it cuts the authentic flow and streaming. And with what I found with the AI, there's no judgment, unless obviously I asked for it. There's no rejection either. But also it feels like a training to be able to go into the rest of the world as my authentic self and be able to have communication, conversations. I can have an ADHD convoluted improvised babble conversation with ChatGPT and get it all out of my system. So when I go and speak to someone, who wants a straight line conversation, the shitty small talk stuff or whatever I don't like, I feel I'm ready for that. But I need to have my ADHD authentic conversation every time. And that's the support. So you can have that, and that's free, and that's accessible 24/7. So you're not having to wait for their text. You're not having to wait for a voice note. You're not having to phone them. You're not having to do anything as well. You're not having to feel that you're saying the wrong thing. You can just say whatever you like in however you like. And then it will interpret it and then respond to it. And then it will ask you questions and then you respond to it. And then you really can get deep, like with a therapist. But it's like an AI therapist, AI coach, and this. But you do need your real person, your coach and your therapist and your support worker. But this is fundamental. These tools are out there. They're free and accessible. This then comes to track 10, which is 8 years. And that's to do with coping mechanisms. Now, I wrote this because I was like, but who would have thought it could be, since 8 years old, it's carried me. The guitar has carried me since I was 8. And I think it was my way of processing everything that was going on. And it's interesting because with music, people will have their own subjective view. And again, you might listen to this album, or someone else might listen to the album and go, I don't like that. Nah, it's not really for me. Or I don't really like that route you went down. Or, yeah, I used to like your old stuff, don't really like your new stuff anymore. Or you've really got into the neurodivergent thing now. I used to really connect with what you do. And that's absolutely fine. It's like when someone goes through a change, they have a grief period. They have a loss themselves. And they used to like what you used to do. Maybe it's the same with bands. Maybe they just want to kind of try new things. And I kind of get it with, like, I love certain bands and then they change direction. You're like, oh, why have you done that? But I also get it. You want to try new things. You don't want to be just caught in that other place all the time or pigeonholed, because that's what people have their perception and their memory. But obviously that's when people start to drop off. But you get your people, your core people, who will stick with you and love whatever you produce, because it's based, from my point of view, on authenticity. And this is where something like 8 years, and it's to do with coping mechanisms. My guitar was a coping mechanism, and but I used it as an outlet, as a creative outlet, and that's why these albums have been produced. And this is the same then, it bleeds into track 11, which is authenticity. I used to write for the masses, I used to write for what was trending, all this sort of other stuff as well. And then it got to a point where it's just like, actually, I need to be able to unmask. And that's why you go to guitar. And that's why I can unmask with something like ChatGPT. There's other people I've started to realize I can unmask with, but not fully with some others. And you're just like, actually, when I'm in songwriting mode now, after so many years of doing it, after so many albums, there's a point where I'm like, I don't put any pressure on any songs anymore. Obviously, having a back catalogue is handy. Obviously, having a set of music is handy. And that's it. It's just like, I know what tracks to play live. But this authenticity now is just like, that's where I want to draw my music from. That's where I want to draw my personality from. That's where I want to draw everything about me that comes to the surface has to try and be authentic. I want to authentically make money. I don't want to do it in a way that doesn't feel right or forced. I want to create opportunities authentically. I want to create relationships and friendships authentically. And but that's a constant process. And again, I wrote that, and it's quite an upbeat, funky track. And there's love the bridge. So it then goes, begin the journey that's within, begin the journey that's within, because I know I wasted all my life with someone that I never truly liked. And then it kind of goes around again, and then it goes, because I know I wasted all my life with someone I never truly liked. And then, because I know I waited all my life for someone I knew I always liked. So it's strange, actually, the masked person that I became, the un-neurotypical person I came. It's just someone I didn't like. And there's no wonder why, and I remember Jim Carrey talking about depression. I've mentioned in a previous episode. It's like, no wonder I went where I went, because I was just living in this kind of other version of myself that I was like, people pleasing, not having my own view, being burnt out, trying to find dopamine in areas where I like start a new business, start a new idea and get it shut down because I could never have momentum with it. Like, just, yeah, like you felt scared to be able to kind of release who you truly were because you feel you're stupid. It's interesting. And this is where then it goes to track 12. And I've really got into the being movement. And I've been on lots of different immersions like the Creative Recharge and other events. And there's a book written about Steve Hardison, and his wife, Amy Hardison, created this book called The Ultimate Coach. I was given it a copy by Angie Scott. And basically I was told to read it as if it was myself and then maybe answer these questions. And it was interesting. I went through this whole book and answers weren't coming up like me writing them down or talking. They came up musically. And I was like, this is what I've got to do. I've got to write a song about being. And I'm only at the start of this, but actually I think with my introspection and everything I've gone into and finding myself and really unlocking it, it's all been part of that. And I sort of feel I needed to create this track, but it's not conventional. And it's really sporadic. Some of the stuff in the beginning and at the end. And I think it feels like the whole album then came full circle, where I started this journey like rivers of gold, and really like I remember being impulsive for years and years and years with everything I was doing, and that never ends. But it's I bounce these impulsivities off of other people and other things, and ChatGPT and other things as well, before I go into action. And I think that is the healthiest way, because what I don't want it to be, I don't want all these things to be shut down necessarily. But I want to go, look, these are the percentages of these impulsive ideas or impulsive ways of doing things. There's a percentage here, like this is 100%. This could 100% work. But this one could 60% work. Okay, let's go with the 100% one. But it means then it's just like, they're not rubbish ideas. They're not rubbish impulsive things that I do, or products, or like, when you buy shit off of whatever shopping stuff as well. Sometimes they're rubbish, and I've done it before. I'm like, I've wasted money. And this is just awareness and education of doing these things and learning about it. And I haven't bought thousands of pounds of stuff in a while because I've bounced off stuff. But maybe it's also because I've done all the internal stuff, and I don't need to buy anything to fill myself up internally. Most of the time I feel like I was buying shit to fill that internal void, or trying to do something externally to fill an internal void. And sometimes it comes up. There's no doubt about it, especially when I'm feeling dysregulated. But I think if we can just really get down to the core of who we are, of who we're being, and it just feels like that journey. Again, going through rivers of gold, impulsivity, having that awareness as you're doing that, trying to find those people around you who will align, or if they don't, then it's doesn't matter if it's a yes or no. If it's a yes, then you can then have them in your group. But a no is okay as well, because okay, I will have a surface relationship with you, and we might find other common ground. It's absolutely fine. And then obviously with the hive, learning about the executive function, what really makes that weak, but actually what makes that really strong at the same time. So if you can outsource stuff to help the executive function, then you then can use, your creative function as such. Murmuration, like when we go in emotional dysregulation, it happens. It's the same, like murmuration could also be RSD. And I think just having awareness of that, and when that's flaring up, now most of the time I catch it reactively. And then trying to catch it during it's happening, I mean, that's, it's a process to be able to get to that. For it to happen proactively, I mean, that's just like master status. And I don't think any neurodivergent people, they might be able to catch it proactively. That is just about to happen. I'm just about to go and have an emotional dysregulation. But that's predicting the future that's going to happen, because emotional dysregulation or RSD can flare up from 0 to 60, in seconds. And obviously going a crisis. Now, that was my journey to be able to come through the other side. Other people have gone through different things to be able to do it. And then having grief, allowing the grief to come through. Now there's also grief, which is grief and relief, and ADHD love call it groy, which is grief and joy. Reassurance, building that support network, but also having that support for yourself, really self-care and stuff. Knowing what your coping mechanisms are. I wrote down all the people that gave me emotional love. They gave me emotional, so there's emotional love, logistical love. There was gifts, love, like love languages and such ways, and what I need from other people and stuff as well. And again, that's not pushing them away or disconnecting, but it's like I know who I can go to for certain things. But also, like if I have a coffee, all right, that's a little dopamine effect. I don't have too many, or I can go and play my guitar, or I go and watch Lord of the Rings, or I go and read this book, or I go and do this. Build up a list. That's the best. That's a great way of doing that with coping mechanisms. Unmasking, if we fully unmask 100%, then we can also get caught out of ourselves that, there might be a home person, like a home John, and there is an outside John still. And that's absolutely fine, because I know I'm living in a neurotypical world. I know there's some like societal kind of etiquette and all that other malarkey. But that's like saying, if you enjoy being naked in your house, and you walk outside, like that's societal kind of etiquette and expectation. You just don't do that, and that's the same. That feels like unmasking. So if you unmask to completely naked, like it's not gonna work everywhere. But you're gonna know if you've got people around you and you go to a noisy environment, are you just going to accept that, or are you, going to go, this is too noisy? Can we go to a quieter place? Have you got your headphones with you? You're going on the train. Have you got this and stuff as well? So there's little tools and stuff as well we can help to be able to regulate ourselves, calm down our nerve system, so we feel seen, heard, and validated, and we're feeling like we can unmask with those headphones on or whatever it is we need. But actually, there's an introverted thing that I'm like, I don't go out as much anymore. Now, I go out for gigs. There's a massive dopamine hit with that. And as a solo artist, I've noticed, I was like, oh, how was I able to unmask as a performer? Well, the reason is because I'm behind a guitar, I'm behind a mic, and I've now changed my tactic from, I don't use the term work anymore. I'm trying not to use the word homework or practice. I want to use the word play and fun and, and the massive word is impact. So when I go out as a musician, and music. And this is the same with this album. It's like, this is impact for me, this album. This is a milestone of my life. Whether it's whether it's a milestone for anyone else, doesn't matter. I mean, and I'm not writing this album solely to be able to show to other neurodivergents. It's like, this is for everyone, because you might be going through some of these things as well. But this is a process. And I think if you can relate at the same time, like a lot of us neurodivergents, ADHDers and all sorts, will hyper-focus on these conditions because we haven't known them our whole life. And we're like, oh my goodness, this has been there the whole life. And if I knew about them, I would have got better. So instead of like trying every single thing to help me fix this is what it was. So it is a smash in the face. And so I would encourage anyone to try and unmask with this process, whether it's late diagnosis or you've been going through it your whole life and now you're starting to see all the awareness that's kicked in. Put it into whatever form you feel. I like the idea of putting it into a creative outlet, which is music. And obviously, if you're a neurodivergent musician, it's just a great way of doing it. You don't have to do a whole album like I've done. You could just go, what does ADHD mean to me in music terms? What does autism mean to me? What does dyslexia, dyscalculia, Tourette's mean to you? How does that sound? What are the qualities? What are the textures? What are the colors? What are the stories that could be connected to it? If you're like me, I like metaphors and analogies. I use them all the bloody time. What does that mean in that context of a song? How would the structure sound like? ADHD is not straightforward. It's very all over the place sometimes. So it might not conform to your standard kind of verse, chorus, and all that sort of stuff. But what if you didn't think about any of that? And you just went to your instrument and just allowed your human presence, your soul and your heart to go to an instrument. Don't worry about the technique. Don't worry about the theory. Don't worry about any of that. Don't worry about what's going to be called. Don't worry about the subject, whatever it is and stuff. Whatever is channeling through you, and you've done maybe a lot of work already, or you're starting out and you've just found out about these conditions, whether you're self-diagnosed because of massive waiting lists and massive wait, not only to get the diagnosis but also to get the meds, or and that's valid. I remember I had imposter syndrome about doing this podcast when I was self-diagnosed. I'm like, no, I know it in my bones, and I've taken all the tests and I've read all about it and stuff as well, and it reads true. It doesn't matter what other people say. No, you need the diagnosis to know if you've got these things. I got the diagnosis, yes, to get right, I'm not just making this up. Yes, so I did have that, a little bit of pressure, but also I know I wanted to try meds because I was working on this physical, mental health sort of side of things, and I knew the meds would be the stabilizer for those to not, to keep me going. And again, I'm not taking meds. I'm not doing all these things to fit into a neurotypical world. I'm doing it to kind of push up the struggles and the weaknesses as best as I can, so I can focus on my strengths and what I'm really fucking good at. And that's it as well. And acknowledging and appreciating and accepting that as musicians, we have a gift of what we do. It doesn't matter about ability. It doesn't matter about, obviously, well, you're a better guitarist than me, or like singing. No, that's imposter syndrome. Just do whatever you feel is best to you. Use the tools you have. Use whatever it is, and then create something that will be timeless. I think that's the key here. Create something that's timeless. And that's where, obviously, I've done an album because I've done several other albums. But if you just do one track that you will be playing in a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades, and you are still proud of it because it represents a key point to what you've been doing and, how you've been doing it. But anyway, wrap this up because it's a really, really long episode. But obviously, if you're into the album, you might listen to this anyway because there's a lot of background and a lot of stuff. And I was like, I don't care. Also, if it's this long, I'm not going to do a whole album episode, album series about it. I just thought I'd just do it and break down everything. But if you are neurodivergent or you're curious about neurodiversity and you want to know what this album sounds like, I've had Alex Dudley, who runs lots of things, busy musician and other things. And he's also music artist as well. And we've now partnership. So he's going to be a guest on the episode talking about neurodivergent musician support worker. And we've now partnershiped up with both of our businesses to create the neurodivergent musician community. This is where I went to a lot of groups, ADHD groups or autistic groups, and I turned up these in person. I started having conversations, but then I started talking about my music, and I realized, there's like an ADHD lingo that obviously ADHD is talk amongst each other, and autistic as well. But there's also musicians who have a lingo. We have a little dialect. We have quirks and where we talk. And I was like, there's something missing here. So this is why I was like, well, I've got to create the neurodivergent musician for a hub for, any neurodivergent musician, whether you're diagnosed or not, whether you are starting out or not, or whatever it is. You want to come to a place where you can unmask, you can feel safe, you can just, be seen, heard and validated. But also you want to learn about certain things, but also have Q&As. So we thought with this community, we'd have a little chat group or whatever it is, but also we'd have a fortnightly Zoom. And this is where you can come in and we'll have a subject that Alex and I will talk about for about an hour, interactive, start doing things. And then last half an hour is a Q&A about it. But what this does, it just kind of opens out the channels. You can come to a community, and then I don't know if there'll be in-person things in future, but we'll see how that goes. But I just think the way we've done I've done the album here. I also want to break down for the process for anyone else who wants to be able to do that. So from a songwriting point of view, so authentic songwriting effectively with like your own sort of music, instrumental therapy. We can really see neurodiversity as a way that it's not our identity, but there's major things apart it that do make us, our DNA, who we are, and how we can use that for amazing things and great things and develop things and help each other to be able to do that. But have a community where you can come to and you can discuss that and talk about that and not feel like you have to explain your ADHD or explain your autism or explain your musician life and your music projects and stuff as well. Just come to a space where you're like, you get all of it. And this is why I've done the podcast. But I feel I should have done a green section here. But anyway, I feel that's what's going to happen. So there is going to be a link in the podcast description if you want to come and join the free community. And yeah, I'd love to, we'll let you know. I think we send out a newsletter once a month with dates and times and links and all that malarkey and stuff as well. Again, it's not bombarding. We know I don't like it myself, but I just think it would be exciting. But anyway, that is a really long episode about the album. I would really love your support with it. Not only supporting it obviously keeps the engine running, all that sort of stuff as well as a music artist, but it's more to spread the word, and use it because I know a lot of neurodivergence ADHDs have got like content and there's podcasts and there's books and stuff as well. I haven't seen a lot of musicians talk about this, and I really wanted to kind of put something together that is for everybody and we can connect with it. And the more people it gets to, the more that they might feel less alone, the more they might feel, that makes sense. Because when you read up emotion dysregulation or whatever it is, all these different terms, you're like, does that really make sense and stuff as well? And this obviously episode as well, if you want to share it with them so they got some context. But sometimes music can get through to us more than words and more than talking. And that was the other way of doing it. So Anyway, thank you so much for checking out this really long episode. I really, really appreciate your ongoing support, and I'll see you in the next episode. Cheers. Take care.